Hey guys, this is just going to be a quick walkthrough on how to set up the CS-340 local environment. Doing this should allow you to use MongoDB machine versus using a Porto. So the first section that we're going to want to look at is the requirements. You will need Docker, which you could get through this link here, and it'll just take you to the Docker documents. From here, you would just download the client and install it. What you want to make note of is following the system requirements section. I did the WSL2 backend method. You could try the Hyper-V, but this is the method that I chose and I know it works. One thing to note is this part right here. For the Linux kernel update package, you do want to install that. That takes you to another section. You want to follow these steps, and then when you get down here to step 6, you open the Microsoft Store. You will pick a distribution from here. They only have these ones if you just open up the store, but I chose Ubuntu, and like if you search, you'll find it. The version that I went with was this one, 22.04.1. That'll get you set up for Docker. For Python, the class uses version 3.6.9, but installing that version, it's a little more involved. So I use 3.6.5, and I ran through this whole process with this version and tested it out on what I submitted for my final project, and it still worked. So to install Python, you just have to follow this link and it'll take you here. From here, you would just get the Windows installer, one of the installers here. Finally, you're going to want to get these extensions for VS Code. To do this, you just click the links. It'll take you to the VS Code marketplace. If you click install, a prompt will come up, and then it'll take you to the actual extension page in VS Code. And then from here, I already have them installed, but there'll be a button up here that says install. You'll want to do this for all 4 of the extensions because those will be what we use and go over for this tutorial. The next thing we want to do is fork and clone the repo. So from the CS-340 local environment, we will come up here and we'll click fork, and then you can name it anything you want here. We'll leave it the same for now, and we'll add it to our file, create the fork, and now you can see that it's under my account. Then from here, what we'll do is we'll go into VS Code. We could go here to clone git repository, or if you don't have this page come up when you start VS Code, what you could do is you can go to open folder. You're going to navigate to where you want the repository to be. So for me, I'm going to put it in college programming. And then from here, I'll open up a new terminal. And then we'll come back to this repository. We'll come over here. We'll do local HTTPS. We'll copy this address. Come back to VS Code. Type in git clone and paste in that address. You could see that it added the repository here in our folder. So now we could go to File, Open Folder, College Programming. We'll select the folder. The next thing we're going to want to do is create a Python virtual environment. To do that, we'll come here to our Python extension. Then in here we can see all the different global versions of Python we have, as well as any virtual environments that we already have installed. So to add a new one, we're going to come here and click the plus. We'll leave that as the name. You want to make sure that this is the path to your repository on your local machine. So that's good. And then we'll select which version of Python we want. When you do this, make sure you don't select another virtual environment. You can see that I have this one. It's the same version that we wanted to select, but it says virtual environment, and this is for a different class. So you want to find the Python version and the install location of when you first installed Python. And the default install location is app data local programs Python and then whatever version. So I'm going to select this one, and it'll create the virtual environment. And this message will come up. We will select yes. We could see there's a new virtual environment here. And if we go back to our Explorer, we see we have the virtual environment folder. Once we have the virtual environment installed, what we'll do is we will install all the required packages. All those are in this requirements.txt file. So to do that, first we'll come back to the repository, README, come down here. We have this command. So first we want to upgrade pip. So we'll copy that, come over here, go to terminal, new terminal. And when you're in a virtual environment or it's selected as your interpreter, you'll have this in front of the terminal command. So we'll paste that. So we see that pip was upgraded to 21.3.1. There is a version 22.3.1. We could try to upgrade pip again. So it did not upgrade it, and that could be due to the fact that we're on Python version 3.6.5. So after this, we can install all the packages. So we'll go back to the README, take this command, copy that, come back to the terminal, paste that in. This is going to read the requirements.txt and go line by line and install each of the different requirements. For me, this is going to go by a little bit quicker because I already have these installed, so it's just reading the cache version of the install. For you, if you don't have these cached, it might take a little bit of time. So I'm going to let this run and then I'll come back when it's done. Once pip is done installing all the packages, it should look like this. Basically, you'll know it's done when you have a line that's ready to take commands in the terminal. The next thing we'll go over is how to use Docker within VS Code. The first thing that we'll do is we'll open the Docker compose file. In here, you want to make note of the ports. So for the port that it gives you in Porto, you would want to change this port number to that. So for me, that was 37450. And then the volumes. So what this does is it just maps this DB folder to where the database will be within the Docker image. And this command is commented out, but it's the command to enable authentication. So initially when you do some of your things within Mongo, you want to do it with no authentication. But after you add users and you start to use Python to interact with the MongoDB database, you'll have to use authentication. So what you'll do is you'll actually stop the container, uncomment this out, and then restart the container, and then it'll have authentication enabled and you could use whatever username and password that you set up. So to start the container, we can right click this and come down here to compose up. Before you do this, you do have to have the Docker desktop app up and running, or else it'll throw an error. So we'll come down here, compose up. When you do this for the first time, it's going to download all these. It might take a little bit of time. Okay, so now it's done. You can see it's running 2 of 2, created and started. Then if we come down here to the Docker extension, we'll see up here that we have our container with our image. And any images we have will be down here. So from here, we could open this. Let me minimize these. We could browse the files within this Docker image. So the one that we mapped is data DB, and we can see that the CSV file that we have in our Explorer also carried over into that folder within the image. You also notice that after you run the container, it adds all these files. These are files that were within the image that came out to your Explorer folder. The purpose of these is to maintain data persistence. So if you shut down the container, these will stay here on your computer, and then when you restart the container, these will get pushed back into the container so that you still have the same data. So if we want to attach the shell to our container, we could come here and click attach shell. A lot of the class will have you dealing with the terminal, and so this is how you would go into the database through the terminal. There's something to note here though, is in a Porto, your port number will most likely not be this default port number. So if you're doing commands in a Porto and you have to specify a port number, you would specify the one that's in a Porto. If you were to do the same commands for this Docker container, you would need to use this default port number. So as an example, let's try to add a database, and I have an example one here. So I'll copy this, come here, put it in our DB folder. We can see that it's here in the DB folder. If we go to our Docker files, data, DB, we'll see that it carried over into the container. So for this, we need to do this from outside the shell. So we can see that it imported the documents successfully. We go back into Mongo, do show DBs. We'll see that it added the news one. From here, if we want to stop our container, all we have to do is either come up here and go to compose down, or you could go back to your Explorer. We could right click the Docker compose file and do compose down from here. From here, it stops the container. And if we go back here, we'll see that there's no containers running. The next thing we'll go over is using the MongoDB extension. First thing that we'll do is we will start our container. So we'll go here, compose up. And restarting the container after the initial start when it downloads everything is much quicker. So then from here, you could go to the MongoDB extension, close this, and we'll want to add a new connection. So we'll come up here to connections, hit the plus, come over here to open form. And we want to change this port number to whatever was in our compose file that we have the port map to. So we'll take this, and down here, authentication none, because you're running it without authentication. See it connected, and close that. We can close this, come back to the extension. We can see here we were connected and we have all the databases. We added the news database last time with the categories collection, and in here we can browse all the documents. Now there's 210,000 documents, so it's not going to show all of them. Oh, another cool thing with the MongoDB extension is this playgrounds feature. So we could come in here, click create new playground, and this is going to allow us to run commands against the database and get the return here within VS Code versus running the commands through the shell that's attached to the container. So to do this, obviously we want to come down here, create new playground. It'll bring up this screen. We'll change this here, so select the database to use. We're using news. We'll just do a simple find command. So I'm going to take out all these. I'm going to leave this one, the find one. Take out this. For our parameters, take that out. We're using the categories collection. And let's just do a search by this parameter. And we'll limit it to 10 documents. Click the play button. See here that it returns 10 documents that match the parameters where the category is world news. Now, like I said, this is the same exact thing is if you were to just go into the actual container. So we go in here, attach shell, go to Mongo, then we can minimize that. We'll take this, copy it. We have to use news. So you see it does the same exact thing, where this object ID ends in 39E21, 39E21. So this is just a cool way to run the same commands, but have also a little bit of error checking, and you can make sure that you have closing parentheses where you need closing parentheses, quotes where you need quotes. If you miss a quote or something, it's going to throw it off. The only issue is if you run this, it will throw an error, but the error that it throws is not very verbose. So yes, this is how you use the MongoDB extension, and I hope it helps. The next thing we'll go over is authentication. Now I already have the Docker container running, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do compose down. Make sure you do compose down and not compose stop. We'll do compose down. Then we will uncomment this line, come back to the Explorer, we'll do compose up. Then if we go to the MongoDB extension, try to connect to our database, see it's connected, but it's not showing any of the databases. That's because this connection does not have a username or password entered. So what we can do is we will rename this one. So let's rename it no auth. We'll disconnect. We'll add a new connection. Do open form. Change the port number. We'll select username password. And I already created a user. We see that it connected. Then if we come in here, should only see the database that it has access to. Okay, let's just add a new connection. So we'll rename this one to news user. Then we will disconnect. Do another one, and this time we'll do admin. And then this one should be able to see all the databases. Then if we wanted to, we could go to the actual Docker container. So we'll do attach shell. We can do show DBs. See that they only have access to the news one. We could do exit. Do show DBs. They can see all the databases. So this is how you start the container with authentication. If you wanted to start it without authentication from here, you would just go back, you would do compose down, not compose stop. So compose down, back to the Docker compose file, comment this one out, then do compose up. Then if we go back to the databases, see that the most recent one that we used not really working. Let's just do disconnect. We come here, no auth, should connect right away, and it does. That's going to be all for this video walkthrough. I hope this helps some of you set up your local environment so that you don't have to use a Porto. I know when I took the class, I used a Porto for the first 4 weeks, and just the hassle of it being slow and no error checking in Jupyter led me to go out and look for a solution on my own. And I saw a lot of students complaining that getting MongoDB running on their computer was not the easiest task. So I set out in a manner where it would be easy for me to do it and easy for anyone else to do it. And that's what led me to using Docker. And so I hope that this helps many of you out. If it does, leave a like. And if you have any issues with the repo, just submit an issue with this button here. I'll get a message about it and I'll look into it. I'm sure they'll rework the class in the future and this video might not be of use, or they might change the Mongo version or something like that. If they do, like I said, just send me an issue through GitHub. So yeah, that's all, and like I said, I hope it helps. Until the next one.